Pillars of Wealth. Realtor Blaine.
All right, and welcome everyone to another live edition of David Green Real Estate. We hope everyone is doing well today. I know I am. It's Friday, July 21st, and we're here to talk about, are we in a reverse housing crash? What does that even do? What does that even mean? Kind of sounds like a reverse mortgage. We're going to talk a little bit about what goes into that. But before we do so, do me a favor and drop in the comments where you are hanging out tonight, where you're watching from. Really excited to jump into tonight's topic. We got Kevin Hawthorne in the meantime from Lakeland, Florida. What's going on, Kevin? Great to have you once again. And then we also have, it looks like, Chantel Lopez from Miami, Florida. What is going on, Chantel? Welcome tonight. Good to have you here on a Friday night. Lisa, my girl from the Spartan League, is hanging out with us in Southern California. Great to see it. We got Jody Gordon from sunny Seattle. Welcome. Good to see you as well. Let's see who else is here hanging out tonight. Eric Brown from Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville's blowing up from what I've been hearing. Who else we got here? Joe from Coral Springs, Florida. Good to see you once again. Always a pleasure. Let's see. Zach Harrison back from Southeast Missouri. Zach and I were just hanging out. Zach's coming to the retreat in Fort Lauderdale. We still have some spots available. So if you want to come out to Fort Lauderdale, David and myself and Christian are going to be there this coming Wednesday through Sunday. We're putting on a retreat. You can go check out more information, davidgreen24.com/retreat. It's going to be a really, really good time. And it's honestly a really good opportunity to get focused on what your goals are. We got Allie from Detroit. What's going on? Tia from Southwest Florida. Good to see you. Javier, Spartan League member. Ni hao. Alicia, Kansas City. Mikhail, Spartan League warrior, checking in. Mikhail just closed on a property, a short-term rental. Congratulations on that. Always look forward to these Friday nights. So do I. We got Vicus or Vichug from Washington. Mickey, speaking of retreats, another past retreat member and a Spartan League member here on the favorite Friday night show, hanging out. Let's see, Omar, you got a long one here. He says, hello, everyone from the windy city of Chicago. Looking forward to some more great information from our fabulous host. Thank you, David and Kyle, for all the great content you guys provide. It's our pleasure. We enjoy this. It's a lot of fun. Lena, hello from Rhode Island. Zebulon at North Carolina. That does not sound like an American city there. That sounds like, a planet on some kind of, space age movie like Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm from Zebulon.
That sounds like a cool name for a superhero, though.
Yeah, it does. We got Dan Bertazzi. What's up? Another retreat member from Virginia. Good to see you. Look at all these people from retreats showing up, hanging out. David, you want to talk a little bit about the retreat that we have coming up in case anybody is interested or in the area or wants to join us last minute?
Yes, that's a great idea. We have a couple spots open, like 2 or 3. I have to check with Kyle. We got another property, another place, so we got some bedrooms to fill. Just to shoot straight with you guys, this is the toughest real estate market I've ever seen. Purely being an investor is probably not going to get done for anybody here who wants to build wealth or quit their job at some point. So I still encourage people to improve their life. I still want to see them get better opportunities to make money, but it's not going to happen by buying real estate and stacking up the cash flow unless you got 40 years to wait. Most people are not listening to this because they want to wait 40 years. So we're going to be talking about how to accelerate your real estate growth. That's going to be done through both buying properties, buying different kinds of properties, using different strategies to add value to those properties to turn into cash flow, and starting a real estate business. So if you've ever been thinking, hey, I'd rather work in real estate than my job right now, that's what Kyle and I do. That's what Christian does. That's what all the people that are in my world do. Even your favorite influencers, they do that too. Their business is either education or something else. They're not, if you're learning from someone about real estate, they're not just kicking back on their heels and living out the cash flow. That should be a sign to everyone who's been sold on that dream that it doesn't work. Because if it worked, you wouldn't have anyone here to talk about it because we'd all be sitting on the beach drinking those Mai Tais, right? We're here talking. It's because we've realized that you can't live on the cash flow, but you can still build big, big wealth. It just isn't going to be cash flow wealth. So you should come to that if you want to learn how to change your life, start a business, really get to the bottom of what's stopping you from doing it. Kyle and I are kind of experts at that, and we get really good feedback from these events.
Yeah, this will be our third one that we've done, and everyone that attends gets a ton out of it, but then they're always asking when the next one is. I've had several people saying, man, I really wanted to come to this next one, but didn't work because of X and Y reason, but it's a great opportunity. So if you want to join, go to davidgreen24.com/retreats. We do have some space available on this one, and let's get you signed up. It's really exciting.
So this is the type of question here that if you go to the retreat, we're going to dive deep into what's behind this, and then not just answer you with yes or no. We're going to give you opportunities that would work for what you're trying to do. So Clint People says, if I can find cash flowing properties all around me with 20% down, but I'm having a hard time finding a burr, should I jump on 20% turnkey knowing I will have to spend 2 years on the sidelines after I buy? This is a good question that if we were in person, we could dive into deeper. So here's a few things that just from reading this, I'm going to guess Clint is not a super experienced investor. And I'll tell you why I can tell that just from seeing this. That's something wrong with that. But Clint's somebody who definitely needs some guidance at this stage in his career. When you say you're having a hard time finding burr, what you're really saying is you're having a hard time finding value add opportunities, because burr works if you add value to it. We typically do that two ways: by buying equity or forcing equity. That's in the next book that I'm going to be working on after this one that I just described, Pillars, comes out. It's going to be the 10 ways you make money in real estate. Buying equity and forcing equity are two of the big ones. So you buy a property under market value, you add value to it. You've now created equity that you can pull out on a refinance. So when we say we're not able to find a burr, that usually means two things: I can't find a value add opportunity, or I can't find a property that would cash flow after I went to 80% loan to value on a refi. Those are specific problems that can now be diagnosed intelligently once we've found them. So where are you looking at properties? Most people don't know what to look for in a value add property. I can give better advice on how to find them. A lot of people don't think about adding square footage or buying properties that with a lot of square feet but are in terrible shape, so they get a low appraisal. Improving properties with a lot of square foot will usually do a lot more for you than improving small properties and not adding square feet, right? And then maybe buying equity. This person is looking in the wrong areas to buy. Okay. So that's how we solve that problem. And then on the cash out refinance of a burr, maybe you don't pull all your equity out, but that's still, if you leave, let's say 10% of your money in, that's still twice as good as putting 20% down on a turnkey. Mm-hmm. Now, the other part of this thing that I would bring up if Clint was at the retreat is that you're probably never going to get a 20% return on anything turnkey. And that's how I know Clint's not an experienced investor, because he's being told that by turnkey providers or other people. Kyle, we know Lindsay, who's entered into the turnkey market and has sworn it off that she'd never do it. Have you ever heard in your whole career a person who bought turnkey that was thrilled that they did it?
No, very, very rarely.
It's almost always hate, or they don't talk about it at all because it's embarrassing. Okay, like it does not work. This is not a great method. And the reason is you don't buy equity. You usually pay over market value. You can't force equity because the turnkey provider did. All the energy in that property you're buying has already been sucked out. And the person selling it to you, they're going to then capture the equity from you. So that loan you get to buy that property and your down payment becomes the energy that gets pulled out of that property that they get, and you get stuck with something that has no energy left.
Yep.
Which means you wait a long time before you actually can make any kind of money. And they're almost always done in properties that cash flow in year one, or at least appear to, but then they won't. You'll have tenant issues. You'll have turns that are happening all the time because people leave. Rents don't increase. Property values don't increase. You are easy in, and it's hard to get out.
Yep.
Okay. So like a turnkey company played me too. That's Mikhail is in our mastermind. We've talked with her about her deal before. Now she knows not to buy them, right? This is one of the things, like you don't want to learn that lesson the hard way. Everyone that has turnkey, they all say, yeah, it sucked. It wasn't that great. We could have like a turnkey recovery group, I swear, for all the people that need help and they don't want to admit that they screwed up. But you would never know that if you're not in the group, if you're not in Spartan League, if you're not at one of these retreats. That seems like a good option for Clint, but then he's going to find out not only does it not cash flow 20%, it might cash flow almost nothing. In 5 years, the rents are almost the same as they've always been, and the property hasn't appreciated, and there's no way to add value to it. You are stuck. You cannot get out of that relationship you don't want to be in.
Do you mind giving just like a 10-second definition of what turnkey means? Because I've heard different definitions of it, and maybe somebody who's newer, maybe not following all the current companies and stuff, that'd be helpful.
Turnkey means buying a property that's in such good condition, you do nothing but turn the key and you're ready to go. So sometimes that will be if you're buying a house to live in for yourself right off the MLS, you're some primary residence buyer. Turnkey condition just means you don't have to fix it up. It's a good thing. In this context, we are talking about providers that buy houses under market value, fix them up, make them worth more, and then sell them to you under the guise that you just turn the key and you have a rental property. They just don't work. That's what I'm getting at here. So when you buy a house that's in perfect condition from someone else and you think that you're buying cash flow, you aren't usually buying cash flow. You're buying a headache.
Yes. The only time I've actually seen people buy, finished products is when they don't want to actually put the work into it. And they're more buying it for like a long-term buy and hold. They're okay with maybe not making some money off of it, but they know it's going to appreciate great in 5 or 10 years. That's the only time, because they don't have the time to put the sweat equity.
But you never find turnkey providers operating in markets that appreciate over time, because they would keep it
always in like the Midwest.
Yeah, they're dumping it in a market you don't want to be. And that's why I'm working on this book that talks about the 10 ways you make money in real estate, because one of them is market appreciation equity, right? So if you were to buy a turnkey house in a great area, I'd be like, good win. It's going to go up and you'll make money in some way.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want you to do that in these terrible markets. But if you don't know the framework that you're supposed to look at these through, you don't understand the 10 ways, you'll make poor decisions thinking that you're buying cash flow and you'll find out you're not.
Yeah. And that's the purpose of these retreats, or at least the benefit of these retreats, is we get to dispel some of those myths and actually break it down to real estate fundamentals, business fundamentals that are going to make you the most successful. So thank you for sharing that.
And there's synergy there, right? When you run a real estate business, you get more business for your company because you're an investor yourself. You make more money so you can invest in more real estate. The more you buy, the more you learn, the more people you can help. They both start working together to help grow your income.
Exciting. Good stuff. I'm going to do this really quick. By the way, if you want to join us live on the show, you can text the number down there below, 833-777-0309. Maybe you have a real estate related question. Maybe you got a deal you're trying to get figured out. Maybe you're looking at a turnkey property, you don't understand it, or maybe it has something to do with tonight's topic, which is the concept of a reverse housing crash. David, do you mind kind of describing to people what this idea is and what a reverse housing crash might mean?
I would, but I'd rather if you got a chance to talk a little bit. So what's your idea of it?
So yeah, basically what it means is we've seen a housing crash before. That's where the prices of properties drop, typically because there's way too much inventory out there. There's no demand for buyers to buy a property. And so as a result, what happens? Prices of homes go down. And then finally, investors like ourselves are happy. We're sort of seeing the opposite right now. We've been talking about this the last few weeks, right? Record low inventory across several markets in the United States. But there still remains demand. And because of that, a lot of these sellers are locked, right? A lot of people who own homes are locked into their homes. They don't want to sell it. And as a result, it's like the reverse. It's almost like, there's not many deals out there to be had. And actually the prices of homes are going up. So that's kind of the way I would describe it, and the way that I've been describing it to the different investors and clients that I work with.
I think that was brilliantly said. It's understanding supply and demand and the fundamentals of what drives the value of anything, including real estate. There's a lot of people that look at markets and say, well, every 7 years they crash. Why? Because someone else told me that. There's people that say when interest rates go up, prices have to go down. Why? Because they have to. Why do they have to? I don't know. Someone told me that. There's a lot of people that are looking at, or maybe you heard this one, Kyle. Hey, I'm going to wait till after the election before I make a decision.
All the time. Yeah.
Yet we look at our lives. I can't remember the last time that there was an election and like anything changed in my normal life at all. So we're here to teach you the stuff that really does matter, what you should be looking at. And it's as simple as supply and demand. There's a reason you learn this in Economics 101. If you can understand what leads to supply and what creates demand, you will have these, it's like the Matrix where you're Neo and you can just see the code. Yeah. You know exactly what to do and you know when to do it.
It's like a trick. It's like something, it's like you get the insider scoop, or you get to look at the source code of what's actually happening, which is pretty good. I've got a video here that I want to jump in and show. This is actually a video from Graham Stephan. We watched some of his stuff before, and he kind of breaks it down and talks about it. But the funny thing is, David, that you said was people always say different things like, I'm going to wait until the fall. I'm going to wait until the next season. He kind of actually talks about seasonality. So we'll jump into that here in a minute and hear what he has to say. So give me a second to pull it up. By the way, if you're coming from Instagram, welcome. And don't forget, you guys, like this video. Make sure you subscribe. Do us a favor. If you are subscribed or if you just hit the subscribe, let me know in the chat because I want to call you out and say thank you for that. All right. So let me share my screen with y'all. All right. Here we go.
It's Guys here. So when it comes to the housing market, we have some good news and some bad news because in the last 30 days, despite ever increasing mortgage rates and home prices falling by the largest amount since 2011, new forecasts now show that there's a higher likelihood of prices beginning to rise throughout the rest of the year. And even though this sounds like a crazy episode of The Twilight Zone, experts are also beginning to warn of a new housing problem that's beginning to affect the entire market, creating almost like a reverse crash depending on where you live. That's why we got to discuss exactly what's happening, the latest data that was just released, the largest price changes depending on your location, and why this Las Vegas property company renamed their streets after Pokemon as soon as you hit the like button and subscribe, because it helps out the entire channel tremendously and it takes just a split second if you haven't done that already. So thank you guys so much for doing that, and also big thank you to Rocket Money for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. Alright, so before we go into the precise numbers, all of this really begins with a very underrated aspect of the housing market, and that would be seasonality. See, even though housing prices generally trend higher in the long run, once you begin looking closer, you'll begin to see that there are consistent, predictable price swings that happen on a regular basis. And as you're about to see, we are in the middle right now of one of the busiest times to buy a house. According to the National Association of Realtors, data from the last 3 decades suggests that buyers are more likely to move and buy a house throughout the spring and summer, leading to a mid-year feeding frenzy of homes that drives prices upwards. Now, even though most seasonal pricing tends to lead to a sales price difference of 8 to 12% off the peak, some locations like the Northeast and Great Lakes lead the nation with a 22.1% variation between summer and winter sales prices, which means right now is probably going to be the most competitive it's going to be throughout the entire year to buy a home, with just under 70% of all sales activity taking place in just a few of these busiest months. Although speaking of getting homes under contract, here's where things take a rather unexpected turn. Despite nearly 1/3 of homes selling over asking price, the average home receiving 3.3 offers and 25% of the market bringing in all cash deals, home prices have fallen last month for the first time in 6 years. Except this trend downwards is about to get a lot more complicated simply because the number of homes on the market is shrinking really fast. The chief economist at Realtor.com was quoted as saying that this week marks the first time that there were fewer active listings compared to a year ago in more than a year, which is a key reason why home prices have barely budged since the peak. In fact, what's remarkable is that new listings were down 29% this week from a year ago, despite a recent uptick in seller confidence. Meaning even though sellers are getting a lot more optimistic about the value of their home, they're still refusing to move. All of this at the core really comes down to what's called months supply of inventory, which simply refers to the number of months it would take for all the inventory to sell at current levels. So for example, if there's 1,000 homes on the market, with 200 homes being sold on a monthly basis, you would have a 5-month supply. Generally, the rule of thumb when it comes to this is that if there's more than 6 months of inventory on the market, it's a buyer's market, whereas if there's less than 6 months, it's a seller's market. Although today, the numbers are heavily skewed towards the seller. A recent report from Realtor.com found that the number of homes on the market in June was down more than 47% from the typical amount pre-COVID. And for existing homes on the market, current inventory stands at just 2.6 months worth of supply. Because of that, home builders are beginning to fill the void, with new constructions now making up 1/3 of the total market inventory compared to just 13% in the years 2000 to 2019. Or I guess in other words, home prices are effectively crashing upwards just because there's so few properties on the market in the first place. And all of this is simply because of a term called the lock-in effect. The fact is, 92% of homes with a mortgage have a rate below 6%, and 62% have a rate below 4%. So instead of selling and being forced to take out a mortgage at a much higher rate, sellers are choosing to stay put with golden handcuffs, and as a result, fewer homes are sold. As proof of this, a separate study found that just over 27% of sellers who are considering listing their home in the next year would feel a lot more urgency to sell if rates dropped to 5% or below, and 49% would be likely to list if rates were to drop to 4%. On top of that, existing mortgage rates are also found to matter a lot. For example, someone with an existing mortgage at 2.5% to 3.5% would be much more likely not to sell than someone with a 5% mortgage. Not to mention, 60% of homeowners with a mortgage have only lived in their home for 4 years or less. So with the average length of homeownership at 13.2 years, statistically, we still have a long ways to go until those people begin to sell, especially with high mortgage rates keeping 1 in 7 homeowners from letting go of their home. This is why home prices nationally have barely fallen despite mortgage rates having skyrocketed. It's also why this is the second time since last August the sale to list price ratios hit 100%, meaning the average home is selling for exactly the price it's listed for. Now, anecdotally, when it comes to interest rates, I also tend to fall into this exact same category as well. I currently have 5 outstanding mortgages fixed for 30 years between 2.8 and 3.5%. If I were to sell to rebuy something else, I'd have to pay substantially more in interest to the point where it just doesn't make sense to sell. However, you shouldn't get your hopes up quite yet, because a new report from Realtor.com projects that housing inventory will experience a modest slip of 5% for 2023 as a whole, as earlier gains turn into declines in the second half of the year. How much of a drop, you might be wondering? Well, for them, home price growth is expected to fall by 0.6%. for the entire year. Of course, keep in mind that these are averages throughout the entire United States, and some locations could see a gain or a drop to either end of the extreme. Although, in terms of what other analysts are expecting, here's what you need to know. Although before we go into those details, it's understandable that being able to save up enough money to buy a home right now is incredibly challenging. For example, one study found that it would take the average homeowner almost 8 years to save the typical 20% down payment, which is why it's so incredibly important to track and budget all of your expenses. So in terms of what the future might hold, it seems as though most analysts are relatively in agreement, because from what I could tell, most of these projections are coming in pretty close to one another. For example, the manager of the S&P Case-Shiller Index believes that we could see a 5% decline peak to trough, with 2% still yet to recover, which is not too bad. Goldman Sachs also seconds this, with the expectation of seeing a 2.2% decline in 2023 revised downwards, or I guess revised upwards, from their previous projection of a 6.1% drop. Or we also have the mortgage giant Fannie Mae. Last week, they revised their forecast, which projects that national home prices will decrease by 1.2% in 2023, followed by an additional 2.2% decline in 2024. In fact, Zillow's taken note of this recent surge, and they have quite a different opinion than Fannie Mae. They think that 2023 is going to end the year 5% higher than where it began, and this is all because pending home sales are down 15%, which means the buyers are snapping up inventory faster than it's being listed. Of course, in terms of where home prices are falling the most, median values fell in 24 of the 50 largest U.S. metros, with the biggest drops being seen in Austin, Texas, followed by San Jose, Oakland, and Sacramento, California, with Phoenix coming in close behind at a 7.3% drop. Now, the largest gains, on the other hand, can be seen throughout areas like West Palm Beach, Milwaukee, Columbus, Ohio, Miami, and Fort Lauderdale, all up between 7.8 and 15% from a year ago. I'm also going to link to all of the other markets down below in the description, so you'd be able to check out your own county, because I have to say, there's a huge divergence between the West Coast and the East Coast in terms of whether or not home prices are going up or down. Now, I've mentioned all of this before in a previous video, but for those who missed it, there's almost a right-in-the-middle split between the country, with the West Coast seeing declines while the East Coast rises. Now, even though this might seem to be politically oriented, the truth is the areas that declined just so happen to be almost exactly aligned with the areas that have the highest prices. Basically, higher-priced homes have had more room to fall, or have seen a net migration out into more affordable locations, resulting in a split almost right down the middle. Separate from that, though, in terms of what the future might hold, housing economists say that there are 5 main reasons why housing prices are unlikely to budge much from what we've already seen. Number 1 is because inventory is incredibly low. Like I mentioned earlier, sellers who've already locked in a low interest rate are essentially locked in on their home unless they absolutely have to sell. This forces the buyers to bid up all the remaining inventory to elevated levels, and forces home construction companies to build as fast as they can, which is unlikely still not to be fast enough. Second, speaking of builders, they can't get enough homes done. Like as you can see from the chart, new constructions peaked in 2007 and 2008, and ever since the great financial crisis, home builders had never come close to surpassing those levels. Today it's said that regulatory approvals, supply chain constraints, and higher costs make it very difficult for builders to catch up. So it's likely that we're going to see higher prices for longer. Third, Bankrate says that demographic changes are creating new buyers. For example, millennials represent 43% of the overall housing market, which is the largest from any generation, and they're prioritizing affordability, slightly larger homes, do-it-yourself renovations, and a location that allows for all of this to be had at a lower price. Fourth, banks are currently offering fewer loans. That's why the thinking today is that lending is already restricted, and if they eventually loosen this in the future, that's going to be a new wave of buyers to push prices even further. And finally, fifth, foreclosures are really rare. The fact is, most homeowners only let their home go into foreclosure when they owe more on the home than what the home is worth, and that's not really happening today. In most of those cases, if a buyer could truly not afford the payments, they would just list it on the market and get a higher price than what they paid, potentially even walking away with a profit. Plus, to show you just how uncommon foreclosure activity is right now, Reventure Consulting provided a really great chart showing just how far we are below the typical trend line. And if values continue to stay high, I have a feeling that's not going to change anytime soon. In terms of my own thoughts, though, I thought it would be a fun idea to look back at my past predictions to see what actually ended up happening, like this video from March 2022. I went over all the reasons why we could continue to see a strong market, a shortage of supply, less mortgage defaults, and rising prices. I also found it interesting that this video is pretty much exactly a year ago on July 8th of 2022. Today we could probably see some softening with a few areas declining 5 to 15%, but since real estate is highly location dependent, we could also see other areas continuing to go up in price, so it's hard to say. Or how about Jason Oppenheim's prediction last year? Because he owns the brokerage The Oppenheim Group throughout the West Coast and is also the star of the hit show Selling Sunset.
Sellers are realizing and buyers are realizing that they should buy or sell based on their own unique circumstances and whether it actually makes sense for them, as opposed to just trying to make an investment or a business decision. But the reality is this is what any realtor or long-term investor should want, is normalcy.
Right now, the biggest catalyst that I see is whether or not the Fed continues to increase interest rates, or if they cut and people feel like they could finally get a break on their mortgage. So many people have already bought or refinanced at extremely low interest rates to the point where, if history is any indication, we've probably got another 8 to 10 years left before a lot of these people begin to sell. That, of course, is assuming interest rates aren't even higher in the future than what they are today. Oh, and as far as the streets named after Pokemon, this is happening in the Henderson area of Las Vegas and features streets with Jigglypuff, Squirtle, Snorlax, Charmander, and Charizard. And since millennials are right now the driving force in the market, maybe this is actually going to help them sell. Let me know what you think down below in the comment section. As always, thank you so much.
Okay, so first of all, drop a comment in the chat if you actually think that changing the names of streets to Pokemon streets are going to help increase the sales for homes for millennials and Gen Z. I'm actually really curious if you guys think that will work. Also, mention along the lines if you happen to be a Gen Z or a millennial and if that would help you buy it or not. I'm actually really curious. The second thing I'm going to do before we jump into this actual topic is I'm actually just kind of curious. When he's talking about the Oppenheim Group, it made me think of the new movie Oppenheimer. David, are you going to go see that movie? You're on mute, by the way.
I'm torn, man, because that is my favorite director, but
I know
Dunkirk was underwhelming, and Oppenheim is giving me Dunkirk vibes. What do you think?
It is, but supposedly this is supposed to be a completely different performance because it's all on the back of Cillian Murphy, who I actually like as an actor, and everybody there is to like make him better and to like make the whole thing revolve around him and the story. So at least the marketing and the background that they're doing for it gets me kind of excited. So I want to give it a shot.
Is Cillian Murphy the guy that was in the Batman movies and Inception as like the guy they were breaking into his head?
Yes, yeah, Scarecrow
There you
and Peaky
I
Blinders.
swear, like Christopher Nolan recycles the same actors. He's burying Hollywood right now. He just uses the same like 14 people in every movie that he does.
Well, he knows he's got his core four or whatever, right? He knows if you get a good team around you, just like the Warriors did for several years, you can be very successful with that same formula.
That is exactly right. So if you guys are wondering if you're getting good financial advice from me, it's the same thing that Christopher Nolan uses, who's, in my opinion, the best director in Hollywood. So take that for what it's worth. Kyle, what did you think about Graham's analysis of what's going on with the housing market?
I think this is actually one of the better videos that I've seen Graham put out, and pretty dang accurate. He had obviously a lot of really good research and data, but laid it out very simply and understandably for a lot of us. And yeah, I mean, what we're seeing is really nothing new in terms of what you and I have been talking about here for the last like 2 or 3 months, probably 6 months. The opportunities are absolutely out there, but it's basic supply and demand is what we're seeing. And the demand continues to be there, especially because real estate continues to be a great, probably, if not the best long-term asset that you can buy.
Yeah, for many reasons, you can leverage real estate, so you can borrow other people's money to buy it, right? We tend to think about buying real estate from a 20% down framework. So if you're going to buy a $500,000 house, in your head, you're investing $100,000, but you're actually buying a $500,000 asset. You only have to use $100,000 of your money. You get to use $400,000 of someone else's, which much more difficult to do in other asset classes. That $500,000 in a highly inflationary environment can go up. So 500,000 going up by 10% is an extra 50 grand, but you only put 100 grand down. So that's a 50% ROI in your money because of a 10% increase in value. Not like that if you go buy stocks, bonds, other things. Then there's all the different ways real estate makes money. Like I was talking about, you can buy it beneath market value. You can buy it in a market that appreciates. You can add value to the property. You can add rental units to the property to force cash flow. You get rents that go up every single year. And if you buy in the right market, like there's just so many things that make this better than other asset classes, but everyone knows that. And that's why they're all trying to buy it. And that's why we're frustrated, because we're like, is the market going to crash? You got to remember in 2010, when the market crashed last time, people weren't buying properties as investment properties. They were buying them as speculative properties. They were buying a house, assuming it would go up in value, knowing nothing about real estate and just playing a stupid game. It was more closely aligned to the NFT game. Like, I'm going to buy this NFT and then what? It's going to go up and then what? I'm going to sell it. How do you know it's going to go up? Because they always go up. You didn't understand the fundamentals of it, but it was like playing that game. Well, people were doing that with housing. We're not advocating for that. We're giving you an education. And I think 13 years after the last crash, there's so much education getting thrown around out there that it is much less likely. I mean, you could always have foreclosures. You could always have people that lose properties. That's going to happen. But to think that they're going to all foreclose at the same time, increase all the supply, and then there's no demand, it's hard to see when we see that they're not building houses. People still have to have somewhere to live.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think the key is to be as creative as you can right now. And that's really like with a lot of the people that I'm working with to help them buy different properties, because it always starts up. My phone calls always start off the same way, right? I get somebody that is interested in investing in real estate. They call, they say, Kyle, I'm looking for a property in Northern California somewhere, and I want it to cash flow. And so we say, okay, well, that's great, but you may not be able to cash flow day one. Let's figure out some other strategies where we can increase the revenue on the property and get you as close to cash flowing as possible. In the past, it used to be, okay, here's a list of houses that could work. Which ones do you want to see? Which ones do you want to put an offer on? And then go and you got a great, rental property day one.
Yeah,
and
we were spoiled.
Yeah, we were all spoiled for a very long time. And it's a lot different. You have to wear different types of goggles depending on what your goals are, depending on what your strategies are. And so some people are looking at, building ADUs on properties. We've got some properties or some clients in contract that are doing that right now. That's something I'm really excited about. But then also, looking just for additional ways to be successful by maybe renting out the rooms or doing midterm rentals, that kind of stuff. So really depends, but creativity is absolutely the key right now.
And we did claim this when the market was really hot. I was telling people it's not normal for real estate to cash flow in year one. So quit complaining you're only getting a 9% cash on cash return. Like it just was bad compared to 15%. And we all got spoiled. And now here we are where we're not spoiled anymore. And there's still ways to do it. It could get worse than this, I promise. It's just delayed gratification. I was thinking how there's a lot of properties that it could get so expensive or rates could get so high, they got to put 50% down to cash flow. Right. If you only put 40% down, you got to wait, like a year before you cash flow. If you put 30% down, you got to wait 2 years before you cash flow. If you put 20% down, you got to put 3 years before you cash flow. If you put 10% down, you got to wait 5 years. That's not an unrealistic market to be operating in. We would all panic and freak out about that. But that's actually sensible, because on a 30-year mortgage, if it takes 5 years of losing money and then you start making money in year 5, you have 25 years of making money. It's still a better investment, even if it gets to be really rough.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's funny, we complain about how many more people are investing in real estate, how much more competitive it is, but sometimes increased competition is actually better for us, because it, number one, forces us to be better as investors. It forces us to be better as entrepreneurs, more disciplined. But in addition to that, it sort of weeds out the people that maybe aren't going to be able to compete anyway, right? And so it just raises the bar, which,
and it rewards the people, like you're saying, who saved their money and who made money. The people that were like, oh, I got a couple rentals, I can be lazy, I don't have to work anymore, I'm going to retire at 31, they're going to be hurting. The people that are pushing themselves, working hard, living beneath their budget, it rewards them by being able to buy real estate.
Yes, that's true. And there's definitely more energy, more work that is required these days. Speaking of, we've got Jessica here who, well, before we bring Jessica in, I just want to say I am thankful that the majority of our people watching here think it is lame and they would not buy a house or be persuaded to buy a house if the street names were based on Pokemon. So that's good to know. And yes, I was just sort of being sarcastic. So I'm glad you guys are all in the same boat. But we've got Jessica here who's going to join us live. She dropped in the chat a little bit of information about you got some flexibility in your life, Jessica. Welcome, by the way. You're 45 years old, you're single, and you're looking to house hack, right?
Yep, that's it. And by the way, I'm a Gen Xer, so I would never sign up for Pokemon Streets.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, so I'm actually looking to get into real estate, but just watching everything over the past year or so, I think house hacking would be a good way for me to enter into the market. I currently own the house that I'm in right now. I bought it at the end of 2020. But I am open to going to a different market if that would be better to be able to do a house hack. I'm currently living halfway between the Charlotte and Columbia market in South Carolina. So I wanted to kind of get your guys' perspective on what sort of markets do you think would be good to look at doing that house hack?
That's a great question. David, you want me to take that first?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I'm going to say a couple things here. I'm going to kind of lay out the playing field. I'm going to soften things up so David can come in and just like mold it into something great. A couple things. First of all, I love the fact that you have flexibility, because when it comes to flexibility, that allows you to choose really the place that's going to be best for you in the long term, right? So some people, they don't have that opportunity. Like, for example, with me and I've got a wife, I've got kids. My limitations to house hacking are probably higher than yours, because I can't just move anywhere I want and, choose to do how I want to do it. The second thing is, when it comes to choosing a market, you want to choose a place that has great long-term upside, right? The areas that are going to appreciate the best and the most, because really the purpose of house hacking is to get you into the best neighborhoods, right? It helps you afford homes that we wouldn't otherwise afford just paying the mortgage ourselves. And that way those properties are going to appreciate better, and they're going to be more insulated in case of any kind of economic or housing downturn. Really, when it comes to house hacking, besides the market, right? For somebody like you, it really comes down to what David talks about, what he calls the comfort and profitability spectrum, right? Have you ever heard David talk about that before?
Yeah.
Okay. And so, for me, again, if I could house hack better than I do now, I can't have as much privacy, or I need more privacy because I have a wife and kids, right? My wife's not going to let me rent out the rooms in my house or anything like that. And so because of that, I'm not as profitable as maybe someone who is in your shape that's maybe single and has better opportunity. So for you, I would say the more uncomfortable you're willing to make yourself, the more profitable you're going to be, the more it's going to make sense. So that would be my two pieces of information. Number one, look for areas that are in the path of progress that have lots of really good long-term growth. But then number two, be willing to be as uncomfortable as you can so that you can profit and really maximize the profits that you can.
Okay, what comes to mind when you hear all that, Jessica?
Well, I have lived by myself for long enough to know that I don't think I would be comfortable renting rooms. So that's where my comfort line draws. So I would definitely need to look for something that's like more of a multi-family situation. I still don't know. Like to me, it would be, like I said, I'm totally open because I've lived all over the place, and I could, and the beauty of it is too that I can skip around different markets too with the kind of career field I'm in too. So, yeah, I've looked at things like Charlotte since I live by that market, but it doesn't have the multifamily in that market like a lot of other markets do. So that's why I've kind of shied away from even entering that. That's been a market that's been so crazy hot, like ridiculous, like at least in my perspective, because I mean, I when I bought my house here and I'm an hour outside of Charlotte, this was the 5th house I bid on. So,
So what makes you, why do you think the market's so hot?
because I see the growth here,
And what is leading to growth?
the population coming here, the banking industry.
Right. That's
Yeah.
exactly right. So that means that's the market you want to be investing in, but it's going to be hard to get into it.
Right.
So if the reward is high, you're either going to have high risk or high discomfort.
Right.
There's always a price, right? Just like we were talking earlier on the show, when you get into a turnkey, it's very easy to get in. Well, that comes at a price. It's hard to get out, right? So when you think about how much discomfort or risk you're comfortable dealing with versus the reward you're going to get about buying there, are you trying to figure out like the way you could house hack that isn't renting rooms and living with strangers?
Yeah.
Okay, what if you bought a house with an ADU in the back and you lived in that and you rented the rooms out to the tenants living in it?
Yeah, I could do that. That would be fine.
Okay, have you looked for properties that have something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the Charlotte market, I haven't seen a whole lot of that. And I've talked to agents too in my area, but maybe I need to go back and ask them again.
What about one with a garage that could be converted?
Yeah, here in the South, unless it's new build, like a lot of it's the carport situation. So you'd have to convert. So
what about a super big property that has like a basement or something that you could live in with a separate entrance, and then you rent out the rooms in the main house?
There aren't a whole lot of basements here either. I know I'm like road blocking all this, but it's stuff I've thought through here.
What about new home construction where the builder will let you have a say in the floor plan?
Yeah, that could be an option because there is a lot of new build going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I could do that.
Like they may be building one with like a 2-car garage or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And you could be like, hey, what would it cost to get you to run some plumbing right here? This little space is where I would put the kitchenette. Maybe they'll even do that for you, or they'll at least put the rough in, or an area where that could be used, turned into a bathroom once it's done. And you use that ADU to live in, and then you tell them like, okay, I want like a 5-bedroom house, and then they normally have a floor plan with a family room and a dining room, and you turn the dining room into 2 more bedrooms. Okay. So now you've got 7 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. So for the most part, like they all just share a bathroom with just 2 people. Now you're house hacking in a sense, but you still get the privacy that you're saying that you need.
Gotcha. That's good. That's a good idea. I hadn't thought about that.
We have to be creative like that when you're investing in the best markets, right?
It's hard when you're an accountant because you're not supposed to be creative. So this is where I let my creative flags fly.
Does it feel like we're being dirty right now? This is so wrong.
It's just like
I'm big trouble.
told, like I have to be the enforcer, at everything at work, and so it's like this is where I can be a little
compliance. Yeah,
I know.
We're pushing you in a bad direction. We're trying to get you to like blur those lines.
I know, right? And part of it too is I still to this day have a little bit of trauma from the last housing crash because I had a foreclosure during that time. So that's causing me a little edge as well. I lost my house.
Fair. Okay, so let me ask you this, if you don't mind asking. When you look at why you lost your house, why did you lose it?
Because there was no equity in it. It was a 0% down.
Okay.
But it was I mean, I had a life event that happened where I needed to like get out of it, and I unfortunately lost my job too. Part of that was losing the job at the same time, and the house was underwater by 70%.
Okay.
It sold
So
at a sheriff's sale for 70% less than what I bought it at.
in order for a foreclosure to happen, several things have to go wrong. One, there has to be no equity or not enough equity that you could sell.
Yep.
2, you have to be unable to make the payments.
Yeah.
And 3, you have to not have the reserves in order to make the payments. So
Right.
what happened was a perfect storm. You lost
Mhm.
equity, and then you didn't have enough money in reserves, or you're unwilling to just keep dumping into a mortgage, and
Yep.
you lost your job.
Yep.
So you couldn't make the payments. But I'm guessing that last property, you didn't have tenants in it, right?
No, that was my own personal home.
Right. So you were responsible for 100% of that mortgage.
Yep.
Let's say that the same thing, perfect storm, happens in, are we talking about Charlotte, was it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
Charlotte. Let's say your mortgage is, what do you think it would be on average? 4 grand, 5 grand?
Say that again. My what?
Your
Mortgage would
mortgage?
be?
Yeah.
To buy that sort of a house, it'd be less than that probably. Well, it depends on how much I put in. Maybe 3 to 4. Yeah.
Okay, let's call it 4,000 just to be
Okay.
conservative. We're gonna go high.
Yep.
And you're gonna get like $800 a room or something, you think?
Okay. Yep.
Okay.
Probably.
So there's let's say that you only can rent out 4 bedrooms, even though you're probably going to try to get a house with 5 or 6 bedrooms. Okay. So you're bringing in $3,200 a month, and your mortgage is $4,000 with everything put together. And then the worst case scenario happens. It loses equity, and you lose your job, and you don't have reserves. Everything's terrible. You're on the hook for $800 a month.
Yeah.
That is much less scary than what happened to you in 2010 when you were on the hook for the whole thing.
Yep.
Okay. You can make $800 a month picking up a waitressing job at a diner a couple shifts a week. Like that is not as nearly as scary of a proposition as what happened last time. But your PTSD, that trauma, is going back to like that horrific scenario where you knew nothing about real estate investing and nobody else did either. And your accounting brain's like, I can't make that mistake again.
Yeah. Yep. I was even nervous to buy this house that I'm in right now, but it's appreciated to the point where I got the PMI dropped. So like, I don't know why I'm like freaking out about it, but it's just still like in the back of my head.
Yeah. Well, that's a normal thing to have it in the back of your head, which is why you're here to talk to us, because we see it clearly. You see it through this lens of pain and terror and fear and horror. We're actually looking at more like an accountant than you are. We're just saying like, all right.
I know. That's where the emotions take over on this part of it.
Which is normal. Don't feel bad. That's why we're real estate agents. That's why we do shows like this.
Yeah.
The reality is, if you can get a place with 6 bedrooms, it's like a 4-bedroom house, and you add 2 more bedrooms to it, which you want to have at least 3 bathrooms in that thing, right? And plus, what are you paying right now to live where you are?
For my mortgage with everything, insurance and everything, it's less than $1,000 a month.
Okay. So if you move into this theoretical house, you're going to be like living for free. So you're adding another $1,000 to your budget by moving into it. You're probably going to be renting out 5 bedrooms for $800. So you're going to be bringing in $4 grand and living for free. Your only expense is going to be a couple $100 of utilities. Like, it's less risky to do what we are saying than to stay in the situation you're in if you do it the way we say.
Yeah. I think the other, like,
I didn't even add this. I'm sorry, Jessica. While we're picking apart your financial situation like a good accountant, you would rent the house that you're in out. So not only would you be saving $1,000, you'd be renting it out for $2,500. You'd be making $1,500 a month. That makes it even less risky to go do what we're talking about.
This house is at 3.6%. I don't want to get rid of this house.
No, you're gonna keep it. So how much would you rent it out for? $2,500, $3 grand?
No, it's pretty far out. Probably 1,800.
Okay, well, you're less than 1,000. So you're still making $1,000 that on that house, and and right now you're losing $1,000. So that's a $2,000 swing just about that you'd be gaining. Plus, you see what I'm saying? Like, house hacking would be less risky than staying where you are.
I think my other fear, this is another fear I've always had, is getting tenants in, like good tenants. But again, you guys have gone back. I'm just walking through this. You guys have gone back to the fact that it's, growing market. There's people moving there. There's demand. That's the other thing that I'm not telling myself. So
this is what's funny. We helped a travel nurse buy a house up in the Sacramento area. This is her first time buying. She couldn't even be listening right now. Not sure exactly how to do what she's doing. and that person is finding tenants the minute that the house is ready.
Okay.
Like they're everywhere, right? This is a time where people are having a hard time finding housing. Now, if you were out in the middle of the woods or like, you know, a rural area where there's no jobs, yeah, that would be a legit concern. But if we're talking about Charlotte, not only are you going to fill it up quickly, but you might get more than $800 a room. Someone say, I'll pay $900. I need the room. Right.
Yeah.
And then when that lease goes up, it might bump up to $1,000. And if you have 5 bedrooms that are all bumping up $100, your cash flow is jumping $500 every year. After 5 years, that's $2,500 extra. That you're going to see exponential gains when you buy in the right market, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah. There's also, I didn't even think of like airline attendants too, because I'm in the Charlotte market, which is American Airlines, which is, you know, crash pad city kind of thing. So, okay.
Jessica, I'm gonna give you 2 pieces of homework here. This is something we do in the Spartan League with our members in there, and it's stuff that David and I do all the time too. Number one, what I want you to do is I want you to actually carve out maybe 30 minutes a day or at least a couple hours on the weekend.
Okay.
And take some time to really write down all of the problems that you foresee with buying a property. Right.
Okay.
Oh, well, there's no basements here. There's no this, there's no that. And did you see how quickly David was able to say, oh, well, why don't you talk to new construction people and see if you can, there's an angle there. Right. Yep. And I want you to carve out, this is specific time where you're giving yourself 100% permission to think outside the box, to drop the analytical piece of yourself and to maybe just dream a little bit and really kind of open your mind to different possibilities, because that's what we talk about when we say creative thinking. Literally, there's like a little bit of creation that goes in that. It's kind of funny because Angela here is watching. She hates the word creativity or creation, so I'm not going to overuse it. But the second thing that I want you to do is I want you to recognize and realize, like, you probably made like mistakes in other areas of your life in the past before too, right? And you've probably learned from those things and you made sure that you didn't make that mistake again, right? And recognize that in real estate and in business, in anything, you're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. That's totally okay. The key is just not to keep making the same freaking mistake over and over and over, right? And so if you've learned and grown in other areas, you can absolutely do that here as well. So expect you probably will make some mistakes along the way. Maybe you don't pick the best tenant, but that's okay. You just learn from it and you move on and you'll get better over and over. It's when you get stuck in that analysis paralysis and that fear state, you're not able to really do anything. You're just stuck forever.
Yep, absolutely.
So that's your homework that I'm going to give you.
All right. I can do that.
Awesome. Anything else you want to say before we let you go?
No, but thank you guys. This was good. I needed to be able to talk this all out because sometimes I just get trapped in my own head a lot of times.
That's normal. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take this email and I want you to email us about getting a loan, like pre-approved for a loan, so that we can get fair numbers when you're ready to do it.
Okay.
And then if you are going to move forward with the rent by the room thing, I want you to reach out to me and I will put you in touch with my buddy out there who is literally the guy that teaches people how to do rent by the rooms, and he's in North Carolina.
Okay, awesome.
Probably like everything that could work out perfect for you is working out
awesome
right now.
That sounds great.
All right. Thank you, Jess.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Bye. I think a lot of us have, first of all, that was really cool that Jessica came in and actually got her fears out. I think that's like the number one most important thing we all have to do is like realize like what are the roadblocks that are keeping me from doing what I want to do. Like in her heart, she knows what she wants to accomplish. She just feels like there's all these things that are keeping me from doing it. And she's realizing like, 90% of it's probably more emotional or more fear driven than anything else. And then 10% of it's logistical, but you can usually figure out the 90% and then the 10% takes care of itself.
That's why you need friends though, because it's not wrong to feel scared, especially if you lost something in the past. It's a normal emotional state to have. You just want to be able to bounce that off other people, because if they're also scared, maybe there's something there. But in this case, we were able to kind of line it all up logically, and it would be less financially risky to go buy a house with an ADU in a great neighborhood and rent out the rooms than it would be to stay where she is right now.
Yeah, which is why I love the Spartan League, right? That is like a group of friends that if they've got a deal, if they've got a struggle, they got a challenge, they bring it to the Monday call. They bring it to the Thursday call. They bring it to the Discord channel. Hey guys, this is what I'm struggling with. This is what I'm figuring out, and everybody can come in and not only deal with like, oh yeah, that's it, you're just in your head right now, Kyle. They can also say, oh yeah, this sounds like a logistical thing that you can get fixed by, moving XYZ or whatever. So
They also get a super cool shirt. Can you show everybody what your shirt looks like?
yeah. Can you guys see that okay?
Pretty cool, right?
I like it. I wear it everywhere.
We just love this logo. I think I love it a little bit.
I think that's what it is. And the colors are like super cool. I mean, if you just want to look cool, you should join the Spartan League. Forget
Kyle
everything.
certainly looks cool. Don't you guys like his new haircut? He's lost weight. He's doing the fitness challenge in Spartan League. He's got those cool lights behind him.
Yeah, I actually, the one over here, I don't even know how that got changed in color, but I like kind of thought it was kind of cool, so I kept it.
Pretty cool.
Kind of looks like Little Mermaid though, so I don't know. Does
Yeah,
that like lower my street cred? Yeah. I guess it could be like Hawaii is what it is. It's like
Sounds better than look at this light. Isn't it neat?
There you go. You know the lyrics better than I do. We got one more person that we're gonna bring in here, and then if we got some time, we'll move on to the next topic. But let's bring in Kristen here, and she's got some different things that she's focusing on in terms of I believe in Montana. Speaking of out in, oh, I love this. Oh, come on now. This is a positive environment here, Kristen. Did you type in your title as investor that's stuck?
I did, yes.
Okay. At first I thought I said investor that sucks, and I was like, now you're being really hard on yourself. But investor that stuck, that's a little bit better.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah, I am. We lucky enough, we sold a house at the top of the market in Nashville. And so we walked away with quite a bit of cash from it. And we bought a place in Whitefish, Montana, a very small place. It's not like a bougie place, but that was we were allowed to short-term rent. And the thought was that it had a basement that we might actually build another unit out of so that we could create two. But then we also started to think about up on the mountain is like there's a little condo kind of place up there that we actually have stayed in quite a bit when we go skiing up there. And we thought about buying maybe a smaller place up there to rent, but with the rates as they are, it just doesn't cash flow hardly at all. I mean, you'd have to self-manage it. It almost like breaks even. And so my thought was, well, maybe we buy a smaller place all cash. That way it does cash flow and we can cost seg it and take advantage of that and have it be a hold, because I don't really want to put that much money in the market either. So I'm in a good position, but I don't want to make a bad decision either. And with the house that we bought in earlier, we did refinance. We redid it because it was totally ugly. And we pulled half of our equity out so that we would have cash flow on that, but we would take this money to either build out the basement or build out the basement and reinvest in another property. So I'm feeling afraid to make a bad decision based on cash flow.
Okay. So when you say afraid to make a bad decision, do you mean having something that doesn't cash flow?
Yeah, I think it's something that doesn't cash flow. Or it's just such a break even thing where it's just like, it's just sitting there and that money's not making anything either. You know what I mean? So at some point, like these interests for these kind of loans are so much higher. That's why I'm a little bit worried about like, if I should just maybe put the cash in, because there's not a lot of places to put besides the market, and I don't really want to put it in the market.
Okay. What's your overall financial picture like? Are you guys pretty solid, or are you cutting it close month to month?
No, we're solid. But I want to make a smart, I'm 50 and I want to make a smart decision. You know what I mean? Because like you said,
You've already made some smart decisions because you look about 22.
Oh, well,
how on earth
you're
are
the
you
best.
50?
And I'm going to come here all the time now.
All right. Have you heard me talk about the 10 ways that people make money in real estate?
I have here and there. Yes. Equity and some of and that's
It's
what I'm
kinds
thinking of
equity,
this
right?
is.
So here's the reason I'm going to go through it, because I'm working on that book now. You've been trained to believe that real estate makes money through cash flow, and all the other methods or ways are just icing on the cake. If they happen to occur, great, but don't count on it. Here's what I hate about that. There's a lot of things I hate about it. For one, cash flow is like the least reliable of every way you make money in real estate, at least natural. It never works out. You always think you're going to get money and then something breaks or the tenant leaves. Every time you have a tenant in my fourplex that leaves and I got to do new paint and flooring, it's like a whole year's cash flow is almost gone. It's very unreliable. Every month, the air conditioner broke, 3 air conditioners broke, the roof is leaking. What else is there? The electrical panel needs to be upgraded. The light fixture fell off. It's like nonstop things going wrong that you're constantly having to fix. Okay. So cash flow, for one, is not reliable. For two, when it is reliable, let's say you make $500 a month. That's a pretty damn good return in most cases for what you'd be buying. Okay. That is $6,000 a year. If you bought a $400,000 property and it only went up to $406,000, that's like a bad deal. Right? They go up way more than that in most cases. That's like 1.5% gain. Well, inflation's at like probably 10% or more. So they're going to go up much more than 1.5%. And that has consistently occurred for a very long period of time. We had the one dip in 2010 where prices went down. Other than that, real estate keeps going up. So even when you crush it with cash flow, it still pales in comparison to the ways that properties tend to appreciate. You see where I'm going with this whole thing?
Yeah.
So I will go over the 10 ways that you make money in real estate for everybody to hear. And what I'd like for you to do is to consider what opportunities could be out there that could make money in one or several of these 10 that is different than just the natural cash flow that you're looking at right now. And then we'll have a conversation about what ideas pop in your head. To Angelo Mejias, he says, will it be possible to watch this after the live? Yes, this show will be made public. Everyone can watch it. Many people watching this right now. It's not live. All right. You ready? Or do you have any questions for me, Kristen, before we get into it?
No, go for it.
Okay. Number one is what we call buying equity. That's when you buy a property for less than what it's worth. Number two is forcing equity. That's when you fix a house up to make it worth more than what you paid for it. So there's right off the bat, you're trying to figure out, what can I do with my money? Can you buy a fixer-upper? Can you buy something that's just in terrible shape and then maybe pay less than market value for it because it's in bad shape? And right off the bat, you bought equity and you forced equity. That's significantly more than that cash flow, even if you got it. Number three is natural equity. That's just what happens when prices go up over time because we deflate our currency. That's likely to keep happening because we keep printing more money. Number four is market appreciation equity. So that's what happens when you buy in an area that is more likely to go up than others. So we were just talking to Jessica about Charlotte, North Carolina. That's been appreciating much more than surrounding areas. So just picking the place that you're going to buy in will lead to a reasonable increase in equity, much more than the area around it. And those are the 4 equity methods. And you have 4 cash flow methods. The first is what you know, natural cash flow. There's income, there's expenses. If there's income that's more than expenses, you should cash flow. We're all aware of that. Then there's buying cash flow. That's a way you can make money in real estate, where you just like buy REITs or buy a note or like put your money from one thing into another, where you've actually just exchanged dollars for cash flow. That's not really super applicable in most of what we're talking about. That's more like once you've made it to the top of the mountain, you've got a ton of equity, you just exchange it for cash flow. Call that buying cash flow. Number 3 is forced cash flow. This is when you buy a property that isn't going to cash flow a lot, but you add units to it. You build ADUs, you do garage conversions, you convert basements, you convert attics, you make it bigger, you split it in 2. You do something to get more cash flow out of it than what it was currently getting. So for Jessica, that could be renting out by the rooms. That's forcing cash flow, because if she rented out the whole house, she might get $2,400, but if she rents it out by the room, she could get $4,000. Then you have market appreciation cash flow. This is buying in a market where the rents are likely to go up over time, because wages are increasing in that area and people are moving there. I know I'm going quickly, but so I'm not expecting you to have an answer for all of these. The last 2 are you make money by saving taxes with real estate, and you make money by loan pay down. All right. So considering that framework, when you're looking at what options you have, can you look for a fixer upper that you're going to force equity with? Can you look for a property you can force cash flow and force equity at the same time? Right? Can you add square footage by adding additional units and make it worth more in a market that's going to appreciate over time, where rents will also be going up? Because now you get those 4 things going on. You won't even care what the cash flow is when you first buy it. You're going to be adding 6 figures of wealth to your name, plus future cash flow growth. Am I making sense with that? I think you're muted.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, like, I think it's just the idea of being stuck on the cash flow on a monthly, especially with the short-term rental, as opposed to just the equity. So I get what you're saying, and there's options on all of those to do that. And I do think it's a market that it'll appreciate.
So the thing is, when you're doing this, let's say you look at a property and you're like, man, it's not going to cash flow, or if it does, it won't be much, or might even lose. I don't know if I want to do that, even if I can get 100,000 of equity. You're giving up 100,000 of equity or more in order to not take on the risk of losing a couple $100 a month. So then the question is your financial position strong enough that if the property lost $300 a month, it wouldn't really hurt you?
Right. And that you're baking it on, I think a cost seg would work on it. I think appreciation later on will work on it. I just think it's like, it's just this current situation.
You're saving money in taxes. So what if you save more money in taxes doing a cost seg study than the cash flow that you lost?
Right.
Now it's a no-brainer. You should buy it. We just miss these opportunities when we're only thinking about natural cash flow. And we've all been conditioned by every influencer in the last 20 years to be like, that's the only thing you buy real estate for, right? But can you think of a reason, Kristen, why a lot of these people might have been preaching cash flow?
I think because of probably the ease of it, what it sounds like to people as far as it being easy. I mean, we have long-term rentals, so we do have a lot of good cash flow on our other properties.
Yeah.
But I think that's what I'm also used to. I bought in Nashville when it wasn't popular. You know what I mean? So I have a duplex that cost me $95,000 in East Nashville. You know what I mean? That's now worth like 600, so it's like I also have a different set of expectations because I'm old enough to have seen where it used to be and now where it is.
Okay, so if you sold one of those Nashville properties, how much equity would you take out of it that you've made?
I mean, a lot.
Okay, a couple 100,000 maybe, right?
Well, yeah, that's what we got. I mean, out of our own home we did,
more, yeah.
So
okay. So if you did that, how many years of negative $300 a month could you survive?
For sure.
Like,
I know it's perspective. I needed some perspectives.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. And I don't want you to feel bad because everyone's in this same freaking thing. That's literally why I'm writing a book about this.
Yeah.
And watch, when I do it, all of the other influence out there are going to trash me when I say this. They're all going to be angry. And the reason everyone wants you to think only about cash flow is they can sell you easier on a course if they can say spend X amount of money to get cash flow and you can get out of the life you hate. Cash flow is immediate gratification. You can quit your job. You can finally get a girlfriend. Your dog will like you. The cat will let you pet it. You can buy a boat. Every problem you have in life can be fixed if you get enough cash flow. So they hype it as a marketing tool to get you to pay 10 grand to learn how to do whatever they're doing. Because it's this idea that, I just got to get one property or I can get 4 of them and I'll never work again. And it doesn't happen. Meanwhile, the people that buy in the right markets, that buy under market value, that add to their properties, they're making $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of equity on each property over a 3 or 4 or 5 year period. They do that 5 times. That could be $1.5 million of equity, and they're not even worried about cash flow because they have jobs. Or like you said, they have a portfolio of other properties that provide cash flow. They're getting cash from places that are easier to make it. They start a business and they work in the business to get cash flow. And then they buy better real estate while the newbies are like, I got to get my next turnkey property. I got to get another one of these cash flowing things that never actually works for them.
Do you think it's not smart then to do all cash or if it's a low enough threshold, if you have enough? Because when we sold our house, we made a ridiculous amount of money on it, which I'm very grateful for, but putting it somewhere, like, would it be smart to put like, say, 250,000 into like a property to buy it and
can you buy it below market value? If you're buying cash, can you buy it below market value and buy equity?
That's what I'm trying to do, is I know that that's my goal with this person, because I think they know that in this market with short-term rentals, and if people have to have property managers and the mortgage and all this stuff, they're not going to cash flow. Where if I buy it all cash, I still can have some cash flow, but they don't necessarily know that. So I already had the agent reach out and was like, well, can you make a better offer? So okay. I do think I can build on that. And because I think they're going to be hurting just because of these interest rates. A lot of people aren't willing to like manage their own short-term rentals out of state because they haven't done it before.
If you could buy equity and then there's a way to force equity. Maybe the property, you make it worth more. And maybe it's in a market where you're going to get some market appreciation equity. 3 ways you can make money off that deal. Yeah, I'd buy that thing cash, but I wouldn't buy cash for something paying market value, no value add opportunity. So I can't force equity, no hope of future appreciation. Now I've just sunk $250,000 into an asset that's not moving anywhere. So you put energy into something, and like you put $250,000 of energy into something that created 250,000 equity dollars of energy. But I want it, if I'm going to convert dollars into equity, I want them to become worth more than what I put in. Right. So if you could buy it low, add value to it, it goes up over time. Now it's worth maybe 375. You've created $125,000 of equity out of your $250,000 of cash. That makes sense. But if you're not adding value in some ways, whether it's over time, appreciation, adding cash flow, forcing equity, you end up running out of capital, and then you're stuck and you're like, oh, this sucks. And then when you sell, you lose energy because there's closing costs, there's commissions, there's things you have to consider. So I know you want to deploy this capital, just look for ways to deploy it that will increase its value.
Got you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for being here with us.
Thanks, Kristen.
Did I talk too fast there, Kyle? What do you think?
No, I thought it was good. I mean, some people might have to go back and rewatch it because it was definitely in depth. But I think those 10 ways to build wealth through real estate, it's super important to understand, because you're right. We need to get out of the narrow-minded thinking of it's just cash flow, it's just cash flow, it's just cash flow. I will answer your question that Kristen didn't get around to answering, is why would people and influencers talk about cash flow over the last decade? And the reason is because, they're selling you on the freedom that you can get by living off the cash and the ability to go fire your boss and go live your own life and go live a life of luxury based on this arbitrary idea of cash flow.
You want a dating analogy?
Yeah. Can I say something really quick that I found really interesting the other night? So a lot of you guys know that whenever we talk real estate, David will often use a dating analogy. Well, something kind of funny happened for the first time. I don't even think I said it to you. David and I were talking about dating, and then he used a real estate analogy. So even when he talks about dating, he just reverses it and uses a real estate analogy. So I thought that was kind of funny.
That is funny. How did I do that? Was I talking on the phone?
I don't remember. You were basically, no, we were in person or something. We were talking about dating, and then you're like, yeah, it's like burring or something like that. So you brought up burring and adding value to a relationship the same way you would to a property or something like that.
So let's look at delayed gratification versus immediate gratification. There is usually a bigger return in situations with delayed gratification versus immediate. Is that fair?
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel really good. Well, I could go do drugs and feel good. That's immediate gratification, but there's a price I pay, versus I want to go work out, go running, go eat some vegetables. Over time, I'll feel better. Okay. So life is a struggle between delaying gratification and taking immediate gratification. And this shows up in real estate. It also shows up in relationships. With dating, let's assume that the real win is to get a wife. Okay. But you're lonely. So maybe you want a girl for the night.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's tempting to go do that, but you're going to need another one later, and it's going to usually cause headaches, and you're going to be in a situation you don't want to be in. You're better off to take your time, date slowly, win someone's heart, have them forever. We agree with that?
Yep.
Well, which of those is easier to sell? Do you think that the internet makes more money off of convincing people that they should go look for a wife, or offering online dating, Tinder, OnlyFans, mail order brides, like escorts? That is where everyone makes their money, right?
Yep. The fantasy.
Because you make money by offering immediate gratification. That's what I'm getting at. So it's not different in the real estate space, where you have people saying cash flow, cash flow, cash flow. That's saying immediate gratification. Get it now. Get what you want right now. You got a problem, I can fix it for you. Easy. Just give me your money and we'll do something. And that is what I'm telling everyone to be leery of. The best returns come way later. They come from delayed gratification, whether that's looking to get married versus picking up a girl at a bar that's got a bunch of problems. It's buying in the best areas, even though you don't get a return right away. The returns are massive. Like, go back and look at what Maui real estate was worth 20 years ago versus right now. Insane. If you see, like, if you bought in the right area, but at the time you bought it, there wasn't a whole lot of cash flow to make. Wages were very low. You weren't going to get a lot of rent. Like there wasn't much supply and there was a lot of demand for it, but it didn't cash flow because Hawaiians don't make a ton of money and short-term rentals weren't a thing. You had to buy and wait for the opportunity that we have right now versus how we started off the show with Turnkey. You could get cash flow right away. At least they tell you that you can. And then 10 years later that, you know, you actually end up making after all your expenses, $50 a month of cash flow. So that's $600 a year. 10 years later, it's like $800 a year. It's still really, really rough. So avoid that immediate gratification cycle.
Yeah. Be patient. And you can't really sell that. That's the thing. It's really hard to sell delayed gratification, right? You can't.
Great point. That's why I don't have the follows that a lot of other influencers do, even though the people that follow me, they tend to trust my advice.
Yes. It's very true. Very true. So be aware of what is going on around the world. We got time for one more video, David, if you want to jump into it.
Do it.
It's why home prices haven't crashed yet in 2023. This is from the YouTube channel Real Estate Mindset. So I'm going to pull that up, share that. We'll get that going. It is 20 minutes long. So if at any point, David, you want to let me know when you want to stop it, when you think we're at a good stopping point.
Okay.
Welcome back to Real Estate Mindset. Today's video is going to be absolutely bonkers. Now, the data is in, and the question is, why has the housing market...
What do you think I'm going to say, Kyle?
Well, I don't know what you're going to say, but the dude's got some energy going.
Who wants to see me do the same thing throughout these videos? Do you guys want to see me move my hands and speak in a choreographed fashion? He's like, hey, welcome to the channel, guys. I'm here for, like, have you noticed that?
Yes.
It's like watching a cheerleader dance.
Yeah, he's getting into it. I like this too. His lighting from since we're talking about lighting, his lighting is decent though. I'll give him that.
That's the problem, man. I ordered those lights today that you sent me because my light used to shine bright, but now it just looks dim compared to you.
It just might need to be like a little something you fix on your app or something. I don't know.
Not crashed yet, or really the better question is why has the housing market skipped negative equity growth? Now the thing is, guys, is I'm not just using wordplay here, and I say that because as you guys can see here, something similar happened in 2006. In 2006, we had negative equity decline followed by 6 months of equity recovery, similar to what's going on right now. Let's not forget, from 2009 to 2011, there was seasonal periods of price increase. As you can see here by the red arrows, home prices actually went up during 2009 to 2011 during the seasonal times of home buying. Regardless of those seasonal increases, the overall trend was a downward trajectory, similar to what I believe is going on right now. Once we were out of the recession of 2009, it took roughly 3 years for home values to even rebound. So the way I've broken down this video is basically making 3 different sections. Now, the first section, we're going to go over a Bloomberg article that's going to really dig into the fact that they believe that 30-year fixed rate mortgages are the reason why the housing market hasn't crashed. And they even go as far as to say that 30-year fixed rate mortgages need to be outlawed. Now, the second thing we're going to go in, now the second section of this video, I'm going to tell you why I believe the housing market has paused or skipped the negative price decline. And I'll go over about 5 different things.
No, it's just bad editing.
That's funny. Like that he made it into there and he's got all that lighting and he puts all this effort into his hands, but then the editor is literally leaving in the mistakes. Does anyone else think that's funny, or is that just?
I do. Yeah, it's either he's doing the editing and didn't notice it, or he had someone else do it and then he doesn't go to check to make sure it was done. 71,000 subscribers, by the way, in case you guys were wondering.
So if that doesn't say it, the lights and the hand movements are way more subscribers than I have, even though I host the biggest podcast in the world for real estate investing and with that poor of editing. Guys, is that the thing? Would I have more subscribers if I move my hands more? Because it can't be the editing, right?
Can't be.
Or is he just that much better looking than me? You think that's what it is? People just want to look at this guy? Is it like a hair discrimination?
It might be the blazer, dude. People take him more seriously.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. I don't wear blazers. Let us know in the comments if you think that's what needs to change. All right, Kyle, go ahead.
Graham doesn't wear blazers, so I don't think it's that.
Things. Now, the last segment of this video, I'm actually going to go into the psychology of fear of missing out and really the mental and physical harm that the fear of missing out actually causes. And if you guys can, for putting this video together, like this video, subscribe if you haven't already, shoot me a comment below, hit notifications. But either way, you guys, I hope you enjoy. Unlike most realtors, Bloomberg actually has some pretty good points about why the housing market hasn't crashed. And you guys, I'm awfully tired of hearing realtors say, just buy real estate, home values only go up, you can just refinance later, don't get trapped renting. I'm so tired of hearing that. And most of the realtors on YouTube are lead generating platforms and nothing more. Bloomberg does have a good angle about interest rates, and what they're going to do in this article is really compare what's going on in the United States compared to the rest of the world, who is definitely on the struggle bus, and their housing markets are absolutely crashing right now. The name of the article is "The 30-Year Mortgage is Saving the U.S. Economy, or is it?" And right out the gates, they come with the question, why is the U.S. housing market not crashing? Interest rates are up, which means more expensive mortgages, which should push down demand. House prices are already falling in other countries by nearly 9% in Canada and 16% in New Zealand. A map from UBS shows that worldwide, many urban housing markets are bubble territory. Now, the next paragraph is pretty bold, but in the US, prices have barely budged. The explanation is straightforward, if not exactly simple. The 30-year mortgage. It is a financial product that should not exist. Again, in their words, a 30-year mortgage is a product that should not exist. And it may well be the only thing keeping the US housing market from collapsing right now. This is very intriguing because they're not saying low interest rates. They're saying 30-year fixed rate mortgages. Intriguing. The risk of a housing crash is not only that people could lose their homes and much of their wealth as they did in 2008, it's that it could cause a deep recession. As the Great Recession showed, a recession brought on by the fall in house prices can be especially severe since housing tends to be the largest component of household wealth. New Zealand is already in recession.
All right, anybody watching this live afterwards, this is a confession, okay? You frequently have heard me say, I don't think that housing prices are going to crash. Let me show my work, because I could be wrong, and then I want you as the teachers to be able to go back and say, hey, David was wrong, but this is why he was wrong, because he showed the foundation he had the belief on. I do think housing prices would already have fallen if we hadn't inflated our currency. I think that we keep making more dollars, which is making prices go up, but that doesn't make the value go up, right? The value may be going down as the price goes up because we measure the value in dollars, and those dollars are worth less. Am I articulating that well, Kyle?
Yeah, makes sense.
Like if we measured the value of houses in Chipotle burritos, they could have gone down already, because the price of a Chipotle burrito theoretically would be staying roughly the same. But because we value it in dollars, which have become cheaper, prices aren't coming down. But that doesn't mean that the market, like if the dollars had stayed the same, we might actually see prices had come down, but it's hidden, it's masked. We can't tell because the price of it goes up. That's my thought. So whenever we hear the logic in videos like this, the logic is often sound. Well, rates went up and we have less jobs. We're in a kind of a recession. Shouldn't prices go down? Yeah, if all things were equal, they would have gone down, but all things are not equal because the government has sort of pulled the wool over our eyes by this inflation. Now, this is not me being a conspiracy theorist and saying they did it on purpose, but it's what happened. And if you understood how little your dollars are worth compared to what they were before, it would not surprise you that home prices have gone up, even though the interest rates have gone up and they're much less affordable than they were before. It would also cause you to have a lot of urgency that your butt better get out there and start a company, start making money, create value for yourself, do something additional, buy a business, start a business, work more hours, whatever, because you'd see that you're losing money every single month. right? Like Kyle, we've said this before. If you had a job and you made $100 grand a year and your boss came to you and said, you're getting a 10% pay cut, now you're only going to be making 90 grand, you'd have a fit.
Yeah.
But your boss doesn't do that. Instead, everything you buy costs 10% more. And you're like, well, that's just inflation. It's so stupid.
Yeah.
But that's the way we think.
We don't complain about it.
Yeah. You could start again.
There are concerns that housing market will cause more economic turmoil in the UK. And really, it is no question that US home prices have already fallen. But have they fallen enough for us to consider it a crash in prices? Not quite yet. Very intriguing data right here. Prices are falling almost everywhere, but among wealthy countries, America's decline has been more gentle, and that's because of the rebound this year. Dead cat bounce, call it whatever you want. Very interesting to see that New Zealand is down 16.3%, Denmark down 14%, Korea 12%, Sweden 11%. The entire world is in pretty bad shape. Now, according to this, the United States is only down 0.5%. Now, I wouldn't consider a loss of value of 0.5%.
As much as we've inflated ours, Kyle. Sorry.
No, go ahead. What'd you say?
Think that might be why our housing prices look like they're dropping less, is that they haven't inflated their currency as much as ours, or it hasn't had the same impact as it was with us?
It very could be. Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Maybe they inflated theirs earlier and they haven't as recently as we have. So that our numbers would look like that, except that we've created all that money. This is a sort of supporting that theory that I gave right before we watched this part.
Yeah, it's like apples and oranges, right?
Yes.
Market crash. But what they're trying to say here is all of these other countries do not have a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Most of the homeowners here have actually adjustable rate mortgages, so their interest rates adjust essentially with inflation. Pretty wild to think about, actually. Even as prices for other things are going up, house prices aren't, at least in developed countries. This is because house prices are more sensitive to interest rates. A decade of low rates spurred by the US Federal Reserve's policy and quantitative easing, in which the Fed bought up lots of MBSs or mortgage-backed securities, and then accelerated by the pandemic, brought mortgage rates to a historic low in 2020 and 2021. Many Americans bought new homes or refinanced in the last several years. Finally, there are housing shortages in desirable areas and more foreign and investment buyers.
This, by the way, this reminds me of the kind of person that has a PowerPoint slide and they pull it up and all they do is read the slide. Have you ever had seen that?
Yeah, I mean,
like difference between this and like Graham's video, the one we just watched, the first one, it's like he's just giving highlights and he's kind of summarizing as he's doing it. Here we're just kind of reading along.
Do you think that he's tricking us into not noticing that by the excessive hand movements?
It could be, yes.
That's what magicians do.
And the hustle in the background helps.
They're like,
too.
hey, look around over here. Meanwhile, they're taking something over there. We've all been fooled by the 71,000 followers he has.
Yes, absolutely.
Buyers, all of which have driven up prices in the US since the last housing bust. And y'all, this goes on. Nowhere in the world is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage as popular as it is in the US, and for good reason. Fannie Mae, created in 1938, and Freddie Mac in 1970, made the 30-year fixed rate mortgage popular in the US because they would buy mortgages from banks, offloading both their rate and default risk. In absence of government intervention, no sane banker would lend a single household so much money for 30 years at a fixed rate. Interesting conclusion of this article, all of which raises another question. If the 30-year fixed rate mortgage can save the US economy from housing crash and allow more homeowners to stay in their home, aren't all Americans better off? In the short term, the answer may be yes, but in the long term, the US housing market will be much less fluid because people are tied to their mortgages. It will be harder for people to move for a better job or to be closer to their families, and there will be less inventory and higher prices for aspiring buyers. Now, I find that article extremely intriguing, and basically what they're talking about is the lock-in effect. Basically, over 95% of American households right now have a mortgage interest rate under 6%. The last time I looked at mortgage interest rates, as of today, they were over 7%. So a tremendous amount of Americans right now are essentially locked into their houses. But as time goes on, many of those people will be forced to sell because the number one reason people move is job relocation. It's not interest rates. It's not affordability. It all has to do with someone's job. Now, I want to break down 5 reasons why I believe the housing market has skipped negative equity, starting with excess savings. This is a great report from the Federal Reserve of San Francisco going into the sheer amount of money printing during the pandemic and how Americans still have an overabundance. Not everyone, but many Americans have an overabundance still of excess savings. And when you put money in the hands of the consumers, they're going to spend it. U.S. households built up savings at an unprecedented rate following the strong fiscal response and lower consumer spending related to the pandemic. Despite recent rapid drawdowns of those funds, estimates suggest a substantial stock of excess savings remains in the aggregate economy. This goes on to say, we estimate that the accumulated excess savings in nominal terms totaled a whopping $2.1 trillion through August 2021. There was a tremendous amount of money and spending, but the thing is, guys, is that money and that excess savings is dwindling rapidly. After August 2021, aggregate personal savings dipped below the pre-pandemic trend, signaling an overall drawdown of pandemic-related excess savings. The drawdown to on-household savings was initially slow, averaging $34 billion per month from September to December of 2021. It then accelerated, averaging almost 3 times at $100 billion per month throughout 2022 before moderating slightly to 8.5 billion per month in the first quarter of this year, 2023. It goes on, approximately $500 billion of excess savings remains in the aggregate economy. Should the recent pace of drawdowns persist, it goes on to say there's about $500 billion left in excess savings, and it will likely to continue to.
In a previous episode, maybe last week, maybe 2 weeks ago, I don't remember exactly, we talked about this example of the market, like the housing market is a swimming pool. And so at times you may pump water out of the swimming pool, which leads you to believe that there is not enough water. And as the water levels drop because the water came out of the pool, that's like housing prices going down, and people panic like, well, is it going to go all the way to the bottom? But the water didn't disappear. You just took it out of the pool. It's still on the sidelines. And then the minute you see interest rates start to go down a little bit, or a tax incentive come, like let's say that bonus depreciation goes away, you may see water come out of that swimming pool, and then everyone panics like, oh, we're heading into a recession. And then they bring back bonus depreciation, and woof, all the water goes flooding back in. But it happens so quick, right? You think prices are dropping. I'm going to wait for them to go to nothing. And then it's too late because it turned back around. He did talk about having pools of funds that are outside of the housing market that can come back in. And that's one of the reasons that recessions don't happen in the sense where prices drop so crazy, like the bloodbath everyone's waiting for usually doesn't happen. In order for that to happen, you have to have way more supply than demand. In order for that to happen, you either have to build too many homes, which is not the case and very unlikely, or demand has to go away. In order for demand to go away, that has to mean something terrible happened, like everyone lost their jobs, lenders stopped lending money. Like those are horrific events, in which case the whole country is going to be screwed. It's not just real estate is going to be screwed. So it's still the safest investment out there. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't suck trying to buy stuff right now. It does. I mean, we're all struggling here, and that's why we're talking about having delayed gratification, because if I can't get the cash flow up front, I at least want a lot of equity growth and cash flow on the back end to make up for it.
Yeah, and I really like I like the fact that he brings up this article about the fact that household savings are down. And I get that that's an economic indicator and something we look at, but it kind of goes back to what we talked about in the past. Well, what is the reason for that? Is that necessarily a bad thing? Is the reason that just they went down pre-COVID to COVID is because a ton of people were spending money? You know, like what's your thoughts, David, on why people might be dipping into their savings? I'm sure, like, yeah, some people maybe are having to do that just because of inflation. Things cost more, right? Yeah. But does it necessarily mean that, you know, we're trending the wrong direction?
I think that people are dipping into savings or taking on more debt because wages have not kept pace with the increased cost of goods.
Yeah.
But because no one's talking about it, it's out of, you don't realize it, you don't change your spending habits. So in the example I gave you earlier, you make $100,000, you get a 10% pay cut. that would sting so bad that the first thing you do is you'd go home, you look at your budget like we teach you in Spartan League, you'd make a 10% decrease to your budget somewhere, and now you'd balance out. And the pain that you'd feel from having to decrease your budget would motivate you to go get a better job or change or improve yourself in some way. But if no one tells you that you took a pay cut and you keep spending the same money, you're theoretically losing 10% more every single month.
Yep.
And eventually that would lead to either taking on debt or cutting into your savings, or cutting in your savings, then taking on debt.
Mhm.
That is what I expect to happen for the next 10 years, because nobody in the government is going to go scream, "We screwed you guys. We're taking money out of your pockets through the hidden tax of inflation." They don't want you thinking that. They want you thinking they're great. Vote for them again. So you're going to continue to see this, which is why I've said several times on the show, I think the inevitable conclusion of all this is universal basic income. Don't like it, not advocating for that. Hopefully they don't take this video down when the time comes that universal basic income is like accepted and they're like, we got to go find that capitalist and cancel them. But I think it's going to happen. And I think that wise people would be like, hey, there's not forever to be a capitalist. While I have the opportunity, I need to go make money. I can go live on the beach when there's no chances to make money and there's no opportunity cost, right? You want to have those Mai Tais, relax, not work hard. Well, in a socialistic environment, that's what everyone's gonna be doing anyways, because nobody's motivated to work. So while there's hay, how does it make hay while the sun shines, right? While the sun's up, make hay. When the sun sets, then don't worry about it as much. What do you think? You see a different angle?
No, I think that's a good way to look at it. And I think the reason, there's a lot of different reasons why people are not cutting back right now, why they're not saving, right? Why they're just choosing to dip into their savings. For some people, it might just be the appearances of like, well, I don't want to like appear that I'm losing money every month. But it's like, at the end of the day, it's not your fault. That it's not, for a lot of people, it's not mismanagement of your own funds. It's the way that the government has mismanaged all of our funds.
Yeah.
And so as a result, people feel like, well, if I have to change the way I'm saving my money, or I have to change my personal financial situation, then it's going to appear to everybody else that that there's something wrong with me. It's kind of like Noah building the ark before the big storm came. Everybody saw like the things that he was doing. They're like, "You're crazy, man. Why are you doing that?" He's like, "No, there's a big storm coming up ahead. You better be prepared for it." I think we can do the same thing. We should be making cuts right now. And don't be afraid what other people think about you when it comes to making those cuts, because you're making wise financial decisions that are going to put you in the right frame of mind and in the right position down the road.
It's a great point. I like your example of Noah and the ark. I frequently said the story of Joseph hit me when I was a young man, where he was basically brought into Egypt. And when there was it was like a years of feast where they had tons and tons and tons of food, he convinced Pharaoh to set it aside and store it, because when famine ended up coming, that God put it on Joseph's heart that famine's going to be coming. They would have just eaten all the food they had, but instead they lived beneath their means. They set it aside. Not only did they have food to eat, but they could sell it for incredibly high prices to everyone else around. And Egypt became the most wealthy nation in the entire world because they lived beneath their means and delayed gratification, right? So I think people make the mistake of feeling wealthy or feeling rich, so they act rich. And the government, through quantitative easing, made all of us believe we were rich, and we felt rich. We still feel rich. We still eat out all the time. Everyone has a freaking smartphone. Like I'd say more often than not, the people I run into have an iPhone or an Android. You don't come across flip phones. Everybody has a gym membership that they don't even use. Like all of us have air conditioning. We're all more or less very wealthy compared to the world, but we don't feel wealthy. Well, that can change. So that's why we're making content like this, just reminding everybody, when you got an opportunity to make money, you should. Just because you have it doesn't mean that you should spend it. You should be investing it wisely and playing the long game.
Not to mention people who were self-employed or in some kind of real estate related industry. You didn't have to work that hard to make a bunch either. So a lot of people maybe are not wanting to change their savings, but they're also not wanting to change their work ethic either to make the same amount of money. I'm seeing that with a lot of different people. People in the real estate industry are actually having to work harder now to make maybe 30 or 40% of what they were making.
How many of these realtors did you and I used to have to be around that would like go home after having 3 buyers that just came knocking on their door and 2 come list me calls, and they had to deal with like a negotiation over a request for repairs, and they'd go to the bar and they're like, "Oh, I just can't even, like, it is so hard to be me." Like they just don't get it, Kyle. They just don't get it. Like if it wasn't for me, I don't know where they'd be, but they'd be totally screwed. I'm really important. And you just have to listen to this over and over and over as they do something to make themselves sound much more important than they were. Now we see there's no houses to sell. You got to really grind to find anything. You're not in a time of feast. You're in a time of famine. And all those realtors, they're not dressing the same way. They're not acting the same way. The pretentiousness is gone. The arrogance is gone. There's literal fear running through our industry right now as people are like digging through savings and taking on debt and don't know how they're going to be able to make it.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to not only cut down your expenses, but be flexible, be adaptable. Just like we're talking about real estate investing, right? Look for creative ways to make money. Look for creative ways to make money in your industry too.
Yeah.
Don't just get stuck with the way we've been doing it for the last 2 years, it's not working anymore. So I guess there's nothing we can do. No, look for other ways to be flexible. And a lot of times that, just like saving money, being flexible and adaptable and making money usually requires you changing something about yourself that you don't like. You got to be more disciplined. You got to take more cold showers, whatever you have to do to stay on track.
I met a guy when I was in a law enforcement class who was a park ranger, and he had come from Scotland. And it was funny because, you know, like my mom was born in Scotland. My grandparents are Scottish. And so we were sort of talking about Scotland. And he was telling me the first time he saw the movie Friday, how he and all his friends were shocked because that's supposed to be like low income area, like poverty, how they survive in this, you know, rough environment. And he saw they were talking about the projects, and he's like, that's the projects in America. He was shocked because they all had like porches. He's like, we're sitting over here in like, there is no porch to sit in. Public housing is like barely standing, right?
Yeah.
Mold, mildew everywhere. It's not air conditioned or heated type of a thing. It's basically sounded like a jail cell that they had and he's like, looking at Los Angeles, California, which is some of the nicest weather and nicest real estate in the world, and they have yards and porches in their public housing. And he's like, that is how much money they have over there, that their poor people are living like that. And it was just kind of a shock to me that, like the poorest person, the roughest life in our country is almost immensely better than a really good life in Vietnam or Thailand or Cambodia or the Philippines or, you know, like Venezuela right now, where their currency is worth nothing. And like they're eating zoo animals to have some kind of meat. Like we can very easily feel sorry for ourselves here and then not work hard because of it, versus people in other countries that look at what we have and they say like, I can't believe how wealthy they are. That's just a good point that you made earlier. Like, sometimes that perspective can motivate you to get out there and work another 2 hours of overtime. It's BFD. You could do it, versus where you feel sorry for yourself because my boss made me stay late again.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing the story that you've told before about how whenever you were working as a cop and you were driving your patrol car and it was like you were just so hot, your feet were tired, all that kind of stuff, but you were just also so grateful?
Yeah, I used to work like 20-hour days, several in a row. So a 20-hour day is not easy, but it's not as bad as when you've done it for like 4 days in a row and you're getting 3 hours of sleep. Like your third night in a row going on 3 hours of sleep becomes very challenging. So it was tough. And people thought I was a machine. They would just ask like, how can you do this? How do you keep working like that? And I told them that when I would get tired, I would just play games with my own head. I didn't feel sorry for myself because I had to work 20 hours. I was like, well, people in China have to do this walking down into volcanoes and putting sulfurous rock on their backs and walking back up. I'm not doing that. I'm sitting in the car and the car's doing all the work. You know, driving a car, my mom used to complain about how tired she was from driving. And it's kind of just like a funny thing because like basically like you do this with your hands. Maybe occasionally you have to do one of these and you move your toe like that much. That's what driving is. Like it is, you're sitting in a seat letting this vehicle do the work. It's not even like riding a horse where the horse is doing all the work. Your car's even more comfortable. You're in a temperature controlled environment, right? And then when I was done with my call, I would go sit in like an ergonomically designed chair. I didn't even have to sit on a rock. It was like it had like arm rests and it had a back like this chair that I'm in right now. You know, like it was a pretty nice chair. Yeah. And I'd sit and let a computer do all the work. I just had to do this and occasionally move a mouse. Like it's not physically taxing to do that.
You have the risk of carpal tunnel.
Yeah, that's the danger, right? Like you trick yourself into believing that your life sucks when you think thoughts like that. When you realize I can't believe that I'm able to work 20 hours because we live in such an easy world, right? And I had a dangerous job, and it was still less dangerous than going down into a volcano and taking rock, or working in a coal mine, or climbing to the top of a skyscraper, working with steel, or like working as a lumberjack and throwing things in a wood chipper where your clothes can get caught and suck you in, or a tree can fall on you, or someone can drop a chainsaw on your leg. Like, that doesn't happen in the world where I was at. Like, are there people that wanted to hurt me? Yeah, but I had a lot of tools to protect me from people that wanted to hurt me. There's a lot of people that don't have that. And that was how I got through those times of working 100 hours a week, and then another 100 hours a week, and then 94 hours a week, and then another 102 hours a week, was by realizing that. And I think most of us that are here, most people in the world would give a lot to trade places with where we are. There's people probably watching this in other countries right now. Like, they're in Africa, they're in Cambodia, and they're wanting to learn about real estate, and they hear the struggles we have. And I just imagine how embarrassing that would be for someone who like doesn't have running water. They wipe their butt with a leaf as they're trying to watch this type of a thing. And we complain because of whatever reason, like we think it should be easier.
Yeah, perspective is key. I mean, yeah, we should all wake up with a fresh, every morning with a fresh perspective on like how good we really have it. We can look at all the things that we feel like we lack or that we're missing out. But at the end of the day, number one, we have a ton of opportunity, but why would we squander that opportunity then if that's the case, right? Because we get so stuck in our own ways and our own thoughts. Okay, cool. You want to watch a little bit more video, or you want to end it? What do you want to do?
I think we're good there. Okay. Reminder to everybody, we'd love to see you if you're live right now on this at the retreat. You can go to davidgreen24.com/retreats. Thank you, Priscilla, for co-signing on the fact that you enjoyed when you were there. We loved having you, and we love seeing you here today. Michael and Haiti, it sounds like his wife is from the Philippines. He said they work 12-hour days to make $10 a day. Wow. Like, when our boss makes us work overtime, but we have OSHA regulations and we get paid time and a half, or like whatever the case may be, like most of us wouldn't even work for $10 an hour, let alone $10 a day.
I used to get mad at my last employer because they would force me to take a lunch.
You didn't want to take a lunch?
No, because I'd rather work through and get done earlier, but still
get done earlier. Yeah. Whereas they don't even get lunches, maybe. Right. Yeah. Like, you just have to eat before you go to work, and it's got to last you for a long time. You go to work with a full belly.
By the way, David, next Friday, you and I are actually going to be in Fort Lauderdale. Are we going to do a YouTube live on location like we did in Scottsdale? I'm going to put you on the spot here and make you give us an answer.
Oh, I don't know, man. That's tough to do. I think we may do that if we get some of the people at the retreat that want to talk. That's a good point. We gotta look at the schedule and see if we have any events planned for that time. But if not, that's a good idea. We could do a recording and just get a couple people from the event to talk.
Okay, so stay tuned, everybody, because we may be going live from the retreat. If we don't, that's because we're at the retreat and we're busy with all the guests that we have there in person. But fun stuff to talk about tonight. Don't forget, if you're watching the replay of this, go in. Make sure you leave a comment down below on what you thought about tonight's topic, and do us a favor. Make sure you like this video, but also subscribe to this channel so that we can continue to grow, and share it with your friends, share it with your family. We always appreciate it. How's that sound, David?
That sounds wonderful. Thank you guys all for doing that. Also, check out SpartanLeague.com if you want to learn more about the mastermind that Kyle and I are in and become a Spartan. Thanks for being here with me, Kyle.
Thanks. See you guys.